while we got involved with the church and became familiar with it, I met Howard Carpenter, who was taking care of the church and had for 25 years with his family. And being a mechanical design engineer, I was fascinated by the quality and the uniqueness of the clock movement. So ultimately, I'll get to that when I refer to a few notes. I took over the job. The church was built in 1867 with a bell at the Methodist Church. And the bell was cast in 1864 in Troy, New York. In 1899, the church was federated with the Congregationalists, so we became the Williston Federated Church. Also in 1899, money was raised by our town fathers, and an E. Howard time and strike round top tower clock was purchased and delivered on 8/16/99 and installed by the end of the month. The E. Howard Company is in Massachusetts, and it was established in 1881 and built hundreds of tower clocks for customers all over the United States. The last tower clock they built was in 1964. The town of Williston actually owns the clock, and it pays for the maintenance, supplies, and the stipend for the clock custodian or winder, which is currently at $600 annually. They do give pay raises because when I started it was $125 a year. In 1997, the original steeple was removed from the tower for repairs for replacement of structural beams in the tower. And it did last a while. It lasted 20 years before it deteriorated. And the latest iteration of a brand new steeple was started. In 1997, I took over the responsibility for the clock from Howard Carpenter, who cared for the clock with his family for 25 years. Howard died in 2010. The responsibility is now in the hands of Brian Meisenzal, and he started in January 2018. So people often wonder how the clock works, and in principle, it's very similar to a cuckoo clock. They each have a time, what they call the time side, and a strike side, which are powered by weights, which need winding normally on a weekly basis. The thing that rings the bell, church bell, on the hour, and the cuckoo clock does a similar thing with its typical cuckoo bang speech. The speed of each clock is regulated by a pendulum. So they're very similar in basic principle, but do represent different masses, if you will. You know, the cuckoo clock you can hold in your lap, and the town clock is a little larger. A couple of interesting facts is that the clock is run accurately through a temperature range of about 140 degrees for 118 years as of 2018. The time weight is 500 pounds, and it dropped 16 feet and has wound 15 miles in the last 100 years. The strike weight weighs 1,500 pounds, drops 30 feet, and has been wound 29 miles in 100 years. Well, I was ready to give the town my notice because my back was killing me from winding the strike weight. It's pretty hefty. And then you guys gave me a raise. So I said, I have to figure out how to do this. So I took an old bicycle from my daughter, who donated it to the cause, and rigged it so that I could mount the bicycle. I ran a chain up to the movement and was able to wind it by bicycling, if you will. And that's still being used today. Brian gets some of his exercise that way.
How long would it take to raise? It's a 1,500 pound?
Well, it probably, if you're healthy and can keep going without stopping, it takes about 10 minutes. And the time side is much shorter, maybe 5 minutes. We still do that one by hand with a hand crank.
How often does it need to be wound?
Basically once a week. You can cheat a little by a day or so, but it's once a week.
So you'll know when it's about time, when the weight is getting down to the base.
Yeah, either that or it stops. And then you know you've been late.
So you took over in 1997 as the clock custodian.
Right.
Did you know what you were getting yourself into at that point?
Oh, kind of. I was really looking forward to it because I just love mechanical things and was totally impressed by the quality of the workmanship. So things do break. So, fortunately I had the skills to fix a lot of them over the years. But they weren't unanticipated, and I kind of enjoyed the process. So I enjoyed my 20 years. I just wore out. And I was happy that Brian was willing to take it over.
So as pastor of this church, as I walk around town and connect with people in a variety of community settings, I will find that the people have a real interest, a real sense of connection with the steeple and with the clock. And so as the new steeple went up last year, there was a lot of community interest, a lot of conversation about that. And even since then, it's one of the first things people will mention to me when I meet them and identify myself as pastor of this church. And when the clock is functioning, the chimes are being heard, people tell me they're so glad about that. And those rare occasions when the clock and the steeple clock and the chimes are still under repair, I hear about that too because people miss them. It's just a significant piece of evidence about how important this symbol, the steeple and the clock, how important those symbols are as a representation of the spirit of community that is evident here in Williston.
Over time, it's still important to people. When the clock it stopped ringing once. And I got a telephone call from a woman who said she misses the ring of the bell and our kids are all upset about it and what's going on, how come it's not fixed? So I invited her over here for a tour and she was all excited about it. So that interest is in many people's hearts. They love the sound of the bell. And my wife still talks about her town clock in Germany. And she has her clock recorded so she can listen to it occasionally. So I think it's important. And, originally they picked the tower of the church because it was the highest point in town, if you will, so more people could hear the time being struck because of its elevation. And, years ago, militias were called by striking bells in town steeples, and they were a rallying point for many people in town. Some people didn't have clocks, so it gave them an idea of what time they had to get out of bed, I guess.